Most women carry a wound they cannot name, yet it whispers in every glance, every touch, every choice of who they allow close. It is a scar carved long ago, sometimes in childhood, sometimes in the first shattering of trust, sometimes in the quiet moments where she learned that love could vanish without warning. This scar does not bleed, but it shapes everything. The way she waits for the message that never comes, the way she lowers her voice to not scare someone away, the way she leans too far forward or withdraws too soon. Deep in the archetypal layers of the feminine psyche, this wound is the silent queen, dictating the pattern of her relationships. Carl Jung would call it the shadow, the hidden part of the self that governs from behind the veil. She smiles, she flirts, she tries to be enough, yet a silent part of her scans for danger, for abandonment, for the moment the story will repeat, because stories always repeat until the woman dares to interrupt them. Imagine her inner world as a grand hall of mirrors. Each man she meets is a reflection, a projection of what she has not yet reconciled in herself. The cold lover mirrors the father who was present in body, but absent in heart. The controlling partner mirrors the old belief that love is something earned through obedience, not freely given. The man who disappears mirrors the unhealed scar that whispers, "You are forgettable. You are easy to leave. You too have walked into this hall, though perhaps you didn't know its name." Have you ever felt the weight of waiting, not for a person, but for their attention, their approval, their proof that you exist in their world? That waiting is the scar's echo. It is the chain that keeps the feminine bound to the past, replaying the same archetypal dance with different faces. The Stoics would tell you that suffering begins not in the act itself, but in the attachment, in the expectation that the external world owes you the fulfillment of your inner emptiness. Marcus Aurelius would whisper through the centuries, "You cannot control whether someone stays or leaves, but you can govern whether you kneel before that fear." And yet, most women kneel unconsciously, bargaining with the invisible. They give more than they want to give, accept less than they deserve, and call it patience, loyalty, or love. But the psyche keeps score. Each time she betrays herself to keep a connection alive, the scar deepens. Each time she waits for the one who is already gone in spirit, she teaches her nervous system that love is supposed to hurt. Each time she chooses the familiar pain over the terrifying silence of self-respect, she feeds the archetype of the wounded maiden, the one who cannot yet ascend to the throne of her own life. Yet the scar is not a curse. It is a compass. It tells the story of where the feminine has been exiled and where she must return to claim herself. When the woman finally dares to look at the scar without shame, to touch it, to trace the lineage of her own pain, she awakens the warrior queen within her. The scar no longer dictates, it instructs. It becomes the threshold between unconscious repetition and conscious choice. Do you feel it now? Beneath the surface of your own stories, that place where you bend yourself to be loved, that quiet room in your heart where you wait for someone else to knock first. It is here that the transformation begins. A woman cannot rise until she names the silent agreements she has made with pain. She cannot choose a different kind of love until she breaks the contract with the old one. And this breaking is not gentle. It requires the death of the version of herself that was content to beg, to shrink, to ache in silence. It requires the courage to face the emptiness she feared more than loneliness. Only then does she see. The scar does not make her unworthy. It makes her aware. It gives her the eyes to see patterns as they emerge, to sense the difference between attention and devotion, between being chosen and being used as a mirror for someone else's ego. Some women will avoid this awakening their whole lives, preferring the familiar ache over the rawness of self-confrontation, but the one who chooses to meet her own shadow will discover a power that cannot be taken, a calm that no man can shake. Her scar, once her chain, becomes her signature. proof that she has walked through the fire and no longer fears its heat. And so, the woman who dares to face her scar begins to walk differently through the world. Her steps are slower, more deliberate, because she no longer chases the echo of love in hollow places. She begins to understand that her relationships are not accidents. They are reflections of her own inner terrain. The man who withdraws, the man who controls, the man who dazzles and disappears, each is a messenger carrying the same scroll. This is where you abandon yourself. In Jungian terms, she is entering the dark forest of individuation. Here the archetypes rise from the soil, like spectres, the wounded maiden, the shadow lover, the inner orphan. She meets them not as enemies, but as fragments of her own soul, waiting to be claimed. And the forest is silent but alive, a mirror of the inner life that she has avoided by clinging to the outer world. Have you felt this moment before? That pause after another disappointment, when you sit in your room and the quiet feels unbearable? This is the crossroads where most women turn back, running toward distraction, validation, or the next fragile hope of affection. But the woman who lingers in that silence begins to hear the truth beneath the ache. She realizes that every relationship she chose from fear, from scarcity, from the hunger to be seen, all of them were rehearsals for this one meeting with herself. Stoic philosophy whispers here like a lantern in the night. Detach from what you cannot control. Align with what is eternal. The feminine heart longs for union, for the dance of intimacy, but without inner anchoring, that longing becomes a trap. It is like a river that floods its banks, consuming everything in its path. When the woman sees this, she begins to pull her waters back into herself, to guard her energy as if it were sacred currency. And this is where the scar transforms from a wound into a weapon, not a weapon to harm, but to protect. It is the inner sword of discernment, forged from the metal of every heartbreak. She no longer falls for the mirage of half-love. She notices the subtleties, the delay in his words, the emptiness in his promises, the way her own body tightens when something feels off. Her nervous system, once hijacked by old trauma, now becomes her ally, a compass pointing her toward what is real. But here is the paradox. The moment she withdraws her energy from chasing love, love begins to approach her differently. It is no longer an escape from her loneliness. It is a reflection of her wholeness. A man may still leave, but she no longer crumbles. A lover may still falter, but she no longer negotiates her worth. She has stopped making offerings at the altar of abandonment. And in that space of inner sovereignty, something sacred happens. The animus within her awakens. In Jungian language, the animus is the inner masculine, the structure and authority of her soul. For the first time, she does not look to a man to give her a spine. She feels the spine within her own psyche. She becomes her own protector, her own witness, her own anchor. You can feel the shift in her presence. She does not explain herself as much. She does not overgive or overstay. Her silence is not submission, it is selection. Her time and energy become a rare commodity, and men sense it, not as coldness, but as gravity. She is no longer a drifting leaf in the storm of relationships. She is the tree rooted in her own soil. And still, the scar remains. But now it glows rather than bleeds. It tells her where she came from, and it reminds her to never again sell her soul for temporary warmth. She is not immune to love. Far from it. She is simply immune to the illusion that love can only come through suffering. The world around her has not changed. Men will still vanish, promises will still break. The dance of human connection remains unpredictable, but she has changed. And that change is irreversible. It is the death of the girl who begged and the birth of the woman who chooses. And as her inner world solidifies, she begins to notice a pattern she had never seen before, not in the faces of men, but in the echo of her own choices. Every relationship, every heartbreak, every intoxicating beginning and shattering end has been a mirror reflecting the silent scar that lived within her chest. The truth becomes impossible to ignore. She was never just choosing them. She was choosing the familiar wound that lived in her. This is the sacred confrontation most women avoid their entire lives. They blame the man, the timing, the cruelty of the world, never realizing that their own unconscious allegiance to pain keeps calling the same story back to them. It is not punishment. It is an invitation to awaken. Until the scar is seen, the cycle continues. The psyche is relentless in its devotion to wholeness. Here, the shadow speaks. It whispers in dreams, in déjà vu, in the subtle panic that rises in the body when love feels too still, too safe, too unfamiliar. Because safety itself can feel foreign to a nervous system that has only ever known love as chaos. And so, unconsciously, she seeks the storm again. She entertains the man who makes her wait, the man whose love is a pendulum, the man whose eyes reflect more of her fear than her worth. It is the scar choosing for her. But a woman can only reclaim her life when she stops running from the stillness. That is where the alchemy begins. In the moments when she doesn't reach for her phone, doesn't chase the silence, doesn't fill the empty space with another fragment of hope. She sits in the raw ache, the quiet recognition that the void she fears is not punishment, but passage. The Stoics called this the fortress of the self, the place no external force can reach, where the mind becomes sovereign. In that inner citadel, she learns the profound difference between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness is the shadow of abandonment. Solitude is the temple of self-return. When she crosses that threshold, she realizes that the scar is no longer a weight, but a key, unlocking the doors to her own liberation. And from that place, love itself begins to change shape. It is no longer an urgent hunger, but a soft magnetism. She no longer grasps, she receives. She no longer negotiates for crumbs, she commands feasts, not because men have changed, but because she is no longer blind to the contracts she writes in her own blood. She refuses to sign another. Do you see her now? The woman who once stared at a phone in quiet desperation, who twisted herself into a shape that might be lovable, now stands with a calm that feels unshakable. Her very energy has shifted. When she speaks, her words are measured not by fear, but by truth. When she loves without the trembling need to be chosen in return. She has become the chooser, and yet the world will test her. The scar, though transformed, will be touched again. A man may appear, a mirror in new clothing, carrying the same old invitation to abandon herself, but now she has the sword of discernment in one hand and the shield of self-worth in the other. Her body will speak first, a tension in the chest, a whisper of intuition, and she will listen. Because the woman who has walked through her own shadows does not betray herself twice. In Jungian terms, she has begun the dance of individuation in earnest, the unification of her inner masculine and feminine, the integration of shadow and light. In Stoic terms, she has mastered the only true freedom, the power over her own mind, her own reactions, her own destiny. The silent scar that once dictated her life now serves as her signature, her seal of sovereignty. It is proof not of weakness, but of initiation. She is no longer the girl who was shaped by her wound. She is the woman who shapes her world, and now she begins to walk into the world as a different creature entirely. The air around her carries a gravity that words cannot describe. She is no longer a leaf in the wind of desire, hoping to be caught by a passing hand. She is the tree, deeply rooted, unshaken by the storms of other people's whims. Men feel it before they understand it, a silent recognition that this woman is not available to the games that once trapped her. Her energy is not bitter, it is sovereign. She does not hate the past, nor does she curse the ones who hurt her. She has transcended the need to rewrite history because she has reclaimed its meaning. Every betrayal, every tear, every sleepless night waiting for a message that never came, all of it has been transmuted into the metal of her armor. She does not seek revenge because she has no one left to battle but the old self that no longer lives. This is the rise of the inner queen, an archetype as old as myth itself. In the deep symbolic language of Jung, she is the union of the maiden and the mother, tempered by the warrior. She is the part of the feminine that no longer begs to be chosen, because she understands she has always been the prize. She does not glare at the world demanding validation. She smiles with the quiet power of someone who has seen her own abyss and survived it. Yet her power is not loud. It is not the performance of strength that shouts to be noticed. It is the soft, unwavering fire of someone who knows her value at a cellular level. She can sit across from a man who once would have ignited her anxiety and feel only curiosity, not desperation. Her worth is not up for debate. Her heart is open, but her boundaries are lined with gold, visible to those who can see, untouchable to those who cannot. Have you ever imagined what your life would feel like if this version of you led every decision? If you could step into the room without scanning for who might approve or disapprove? If you could love without the tremor of fear that someone's absence would shatter you? This is the gift of the scar when it has been fully integrated. It becomes a teacher, a guardian, and finally a crown. The Stoics would bow to this transformation, for it is the embodiment of their deepest teaching. Control the self, and the world can touch nothing essential. She has ceased to gamble her peace on the dice of another's affection. She may still feel the pull of attraction, the ache of longing, but she no longer mistakes them for chains. She lets desire flow through her without losing herself to it. And here lies the paradox of power. When she no longer chases love, she becomes magnetic. The same energy that once repelled devotion, the desperation, the unspoken fear, the hunger, has dissolved into radiance. Men are drawn, but she no longer waits for them. Opportunities come, but she no longer bows to them. Life bends differently around the woman who has chosen herself. Yet, she is not untouchable. She can still love fiercely, but now that love flows from choice, not need. She can still grieve loss, but grief no longer drags her into the abyss of self-betrayal. She can still feel the whisper of the old scar, but she meets it with reverence instead of shame. Her very presence says, "I have walked through fire and returned with my soul intact." And in this state, every relationship transforms. She does not tolerate what once consumed her because her nervous system no longer confuses chaos with connection. She attracts partners who can meet her in this stillness, or she walks away without hesitation when they cannot. Love is no longer a game of survival. It is an extension of her already full life. The silent scar, once a sentence, has become a signature. It marks the woman who has crossed the threshold from unconscious repetition to conscious creation. And as she looks back on the path, she does not see weakness or regret. She sees the making of a queen, forged in the quiet crucible of her own becoming. And now the journey comes to its final revelation, the moment where the woman no longer sees herself as broken, waiting for someone else to complete her story. She understands that the scar she carried, the one that once dictated every choice, every anxious hope, every silent compromise, was never her enemy. It was her initiation. In the language of myth and depth psychology, this is the full cycle of the heroine's descent. The wounded maiden descended into her own shadow, confronted the ghosts of her past, and emerged as the sovereign queen. She no longer clings to the hands that promise salvation, because she has learned that salvation was never outside of her. Love, devotion, belonging, all of it begins with the relationship she has cultivated with her own soul. Now, when a man enters her life, she sees him clearly. She no longer projects the father she wished she had, the validation she craved, or the fears she ran from. She meets him as he is, not as a bandage for her wounds. This is the highest form of intimacy, the meeting of two whole beings. not two fragments trying to patch each other together. And when life tests her, as life always does, she no longer bends into shapes that betray her essence. If someone pulls away, she does not chase. If someone withholds love, she does not beg. She lets the door close because she knows another will open, and more importantly, she knows she is already home within herself. The woman who has befriended her scar does not live in scarcity, she lives in sovereignty. The Stoics would recognize this as the truest freedom, freedom not from pain, but from enslavement to it. She may still feel the sting of disappointment, the ache of longing, the pangs of love's uncertainty, but none of it dictates her choices anymore. She moves from alignment, not fear. She chooses relationships that honor the woman she has become, not the girl she used to be. And the world begins to respond in kind. Men feel the difference in her energy, not as coldness, but as clarity. Friends and family notice that her presence carries a calm weight, as if she no longer needs to perform or persuade. She is magnetic because she is rooted. She is radiant because she no longer leaks her light into the void of unworthy connections. Do you feel it now? The shift in your own chest as this truth lands, that the life you long for does not arrive through another's approval, but through your own awakening. The scar that once dictated your every step becomes the proof that you can rise, that you can choose, that you can transform your pain into power. And in that final transformation, something subtle yet monumental occurs. She no longer views love as a rescue, but as a reflection. Partners do not complete her, they meet her. Relationships no longer define her, they expand her. And if ever the day comes where love walks away again, she will not shatter. She will bow to the lesson, adjust her crown, and keep walking with the quiet grace of a woman who owns herself. The silent scar has done its work. It has carried her from shadow to light, from begging to choosing, from exile to homecoming. And as she steps fully into the world, as the embodiment of her own worth, she finally understands the truth that all the heartbreaks were trying to teach her. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.